Somebody sent me an email, and during one of my videos, I spoke about being called to renew the Eucharist, and people were asking me, how did I know that I was called to renew the Eucharist? And I've spoken about this bits and pieces in other videos, so I just thought I'd put this out there because I want to tie it into other things that I'm saying, so that people can understand where I'm going with this. As I said, I was a seminarian for 9 years, but I always really had a beautiful, love for Christ. I love the Eucharist. Even as a child, really remember my first communion was very, very clear in my mind. Seminarian, left Legionaries of Christ, lost my faith, came back to my faith. The Camino de Santiago really helped me on that. And back in about 2016, as I was going to traditional Latin Mass and starting to, really try to grapple with my faith, going to confession more often, I was out running. I do the marathon every year. I try to keep active. I was out running here in Mayo, doing this 10-kilometer run that I normally do. And, when you're running, really reflecting, meditating, and the call came, renew the Eucharist. And I'm always skeptical of what comes to my mind sometimes, and I suppose we all are. How do we know what God wants of us? So I said to God, look, if you want that from me, send me a sign. And I don't want it to be a sign at church. I want you to send me a sign saying, so that I understand this is what you want me to do. That Christmas, I was we used to have this icon below in our sitting room, and it's an icon of Our Lady, Christ, and Saint Basil that I bought in Daphne and Mount Athos. During my whole faith crisis, trying to understand what the Catholic faith was, I went and explored the Orthodox world, went to Mount Athos, and bought this icon. And so we have this. I had this down in my sitting room above the mantelpiece. And at Christmas, we were putting decorations up. So I folded this icon and I brought it upstairs and I put it beside my bed just before Christmas. And I left it down lying beside my bed. And as I left the room, the other side of my room, completely opposite, as I left my room, my daughter's first Holy Communion prayer book, flew from one side of the room, completely one side, and landed in front of that icon. And I picked up the book and I said, okay, well, yeah, sometimes signs can be pretty obvious. This is what you want me to do. That's what I'll do it. I have no idea how it's going to happen. And, it's been a real struggle. I've got it wrong so many times. I've ruffled feathers and maybe annoyed people and so on and so forth. But in my mind, I've reasoned, well, look, you want to renew the Eucharist. The Eucharist, there can be no confusion in the church on what the Eucharist is, which is the body and blood, soul and divinity of the second person, the Holy Trinity. It's settled faith. So it's not like we're coming here with some new spirituality or some new something in the church. No, just go to the Eucharist. Just go and experience Christ in the Eucharist. That's all we need to do. When it comes to traditional Latin Mass, I want to be very, 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 very clear. I have no ideological push, and I've given that impression, please forgive me. I don't want a church divided. I don't want us rebelling against the magisterium, against the Pope, or, against bishops, or creating anything. I want you to experience Christ in the Eucharist, because it's that it's the small details. When they were doing this reform of the liturgy, it was the small details that seems to have slipped through the cracks when it came to the liturgy. Especially how we treat the Eucharist, how a priest prays the Mass. Because in the old liturgy, the Mass lends itself to be, it just does, it just lends itself. And I don't want to be dividing the church or going against Second Vatican Council or going against the Pope or the bishops or anything on this. When I promote the traditional Latin Mass, I'm asking for a renewal of the Eucharist. And it just, the Eucharist just marries, it just presents itself so beautifully in the traditional Latin Mass. And you have to experience this. And this is where I'm asking Catholics to experience the Mass of the Ages, never, ever, ever as a sign of protest. We don't go to traditional Latin Mass to protest or any such way. That would be a horrific thing to do, because, you know, that is dividing the church. You go to traditional Latin Mass as a sign of wonderment, of beauty. You know, Bishop Barron is always teaching, you know, true, good and beautiful. This is what I tell my kids. Always look for what is true, good and beautiful. The liturgy should be the highest point of beauty, of truth, of goodness. And this is what we have lost. And how to get this point across to the Pope, to cardinals, to bishops is very, very difficult. And I'm not I don't think I'm the best person actually to be doing this. I really don't. But look, it's not about me at the end of the day. I don't need your money. I need you to renew the Eucharist. I need you to experience that profound mystic encounter with Christ in the Eucharist, to arrive to Calvary in the Eucharist. And it just lends itself. And I suppose God has been going along and placing me on this road. 2019, went to Huntsville, Alabama in the USA, where Mother Angelica is buried. It's just this amazing basilica, shrine that Mother Angelica built. And she had that booklet. There's a booklet there, and she tried to make the Novus Ordo as traditional as possible. And if you go to Huntsville, Alabama, you know, the priests say the Novus Ordo ad Orientem. They have altar rails, they have altar cloths, they have the paten. You receive communion kneeling on the tongue. There's a beautiful shrine, and then you have the crypt, and you have the tomb of Mother Angelica at the back of the crypt. So I went there early 2019, was really, really impressed by the shrine, loved it. You know, if every Novus Ordo had been celebrated like this since 1971, how different the church would be. It simply would. It simply would be different. You know, we don't need an entertainment session. We need prayer. We need to be led in prayer. We need to allow priests to pray the Mass. So I went there early 2019, and then in that shrine, and I do recommend, if you're in America, go to Huntsville, Alabama, the shrine where Mother Angelica is buried. And in that shrine, they have a museum to the Eucharist, which is simply incredible. But it was closed. It was February 2019. The museum, for whatever reason, I couldn't get into it, or it, whatever, you know. So later that year, September 2019, I went back to America, went to the shrine a second time to coordinate myself to see, making sure that museum was open that day. It was the day of El Niño. There was a Latin celebration, El Niño Jesus, and there was a lot of Latinos there, Mexicans. There was great food there that day. It was a beautiful day, and I got to visit the museum. And then I was trying to see, look, could we get this into Knock in Ireland? You know, it'd be great if we could have a centre of catechesis for the Eucharist in Ireland. That whole museum, I wanted to copy paste that into Ireland. And I was talking to different people, trying to see what we could do, speaking to different priests, bishops. And I suppose the pandemic hit, and that really put an end to what I was trying to do at the time. And people that know me, you know, I don't get everything right. I absolutely don't get everything right. But that was the project at the time to try in Ireland, trying to see if we could have a perpetual adoration chapel in Knock, because there isn't a 24/7 perpetual adoration chapel in Knock, and a museum where we could bring our children to be catechized in the Eucharist. But most importantly, what the church needs to do is return to the Eucharist, to the Mass. And, you know, there are saints in the past, and I'm not holding myself up to be any saint. I'm just saying, you know, people have called out what has gone wrong in the church. You know, when the Pope went to Avignon, he wasn't Bishop of Avignon, he was Bishop of Rome. You know, and if you go to Avignon, I've been to Avignon, you can see there today, you know, the palace is completely empty. There's nothing left of really, you know, it's not even a chapel left where the popes used to be. They returned to Rome. But, you know, people called out the fact, you're not supposed to be in Avignon. You're supposed to be in Rome. And it's the same sense that I'm trying to say, humbly, without dividing the church, without saying Pope Francis isn't Pope, without saying, you know, we can struggle with everything in the church, but without denying Second Vatican Council. I'm asking the church to please do not punish traditional Catholics. We are not trying, well, I'm not trying to divide the church. I'm trying to show we've lost the appreciation of the Eucharist. We simply have. We have lost what is the most truest, good, beautiful encounter with Christ. We simply have lost it. And if you were to take, you know, if you were to audit against Vatican II, against Sacrosanctum Concilium, what were the church fathers, what did they want to happen in the Mass? They didn't want what we have today. They simply didn't. Objectively, we can say Second Vatican Council, church fathers, the bishops didn't want the destruction of the Eucharist that we see today in the Mass. They didn't want a man-centered Mass. I mean, yesterday went with my son to football training, and you know, went to pray the Rosary in the local church. There happened to be Mass on, new Novus Ordo Mass. There was 12 women and the priest. The priest was saying Mass. And when it came to communion, the priest took the ciborium and handed it to a woman, and I'm sure she's very holy and very good. But he took the ciborium, handed it to her. He sat down, and she distributed the communion. And this is what has gone on in the Novus Ordo. I mean, it's, where was this discussed in Second Vatican Council? It wasn't. Suddenly, what was supposed to be extraordinary, ministers of Holy Communion, has become the ordinary. And what the priest should be doing, he doesn't do. And we wonder why we don't have vocations and why we're not able to engage men. The reason why there's a crisis in the priesthood today, and a crisis in vocations, and a crisis in the faith, is we haven't allowed Catholics to have their heart and their mind captured by Christ. And the Eucharist, confession, sacraments is the most effective way to have your mind and your heart captured by Christ. So there are different angles people are coming at this, and people, you know, and this is why, you know, I'm not criticizing. I don't want to be criticizing, but we have to keep the personalities out of this and present the truth. And I don't want this argument to be clouded by my preferences or the way I present it. I want you to encounter the truth. I want your heart and mind to be engaged with the encounter of Christ. And once you're this, your mind is blown open. It's like, oh, wow, you know. And I think people have seen in the channel, I don't reject the magisterium of the church. I don't reject it. I want people to engage with the church as we walk forward. We don't live in a past and we don't live in a future. The only church we have is the church we have today. But I can say, as somebody who has gone to so many masses, the Novus, I'm the person that has experienced the Novus Ordo the most reverent way you can experience it. You know, we really did have reverent Novus Ordo in Latin. it's just there's details that have been lost. They simply have. And you notice these details and said, that detail, that, how you receive communion in the Vetus order, in the old rite, is beautiful. And it's been removed. It's kind of been taken away from us. And it's these small details. And I'm nearly sure those men that rushed through the changes to the Mass at a very difficult time in the church in the 1960s, with all of the social upheaval and all of the stuff that was going on in the 1960s. I mean, just put yourself in the minds of these men in the 1960s. If you think about it, put your mind in the, they were rushing through you're changing the Mass that has existed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. You're changing that, and in a very short period of time, a change to the Mass that has never happened in the history of the church. And I do recommend that people read the books that Peter Kwasniewski in the US has published. He's very measured. He's really very, very, very measured, and he loves his faith. Read his books. It's unprecedented what happened during that change in the Mass, how it was done. And we can have conspiracies about the intentions of Bugnini, but we do objectively have now the results 50 years later. And I love the Mass, and I go to all Masses. I go to any rite. I'll go really. And you see there's deficiencies. They've lost something, especially how we treat the Eucharist. If you don't get the Eucharist right, nothing else will work in the church. It is fundamental. And the new Mass, the Novus Ordo Missae, has lost a precious structure that the Eucharist should have been set in. And we've lost the beautiful traditions of going to confession before Mass. Confession, the Eucharist, really, it'll change your soul, it'll increase virtue. It simply does. It simply does. So that's my plea to the church. It's not a political plea. It's not a superiority plea because I'm the sinner like anyone else. It's far bigger than that. And I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to work out. We'll have to let the Holy Spirit move minds and hearts. This change will only come from the top down. But I would ask people, humbly ask them, experience the traditional Latin Mass, not as a sign of protest. Again, let me stress this very, very, very much. We don't go as a sign of protest. If you go to the Society of St. Pius X Mass, we're not going to protest that the church. We are going to love the church even more. The traditional Catholic Church, the traditional movement cannot reject Second Vatican Council, cannot reject the legitimate concerns raised in Sacrosanctum Concilium. It is right and proper for Catholics to know the Mass, to know the prayers of the Mass, to know what the priest is praying. And I would argue today, the traditional movement, which is a modern movement, not a modernist movement, a modern movement in the church, the traditional movement complies with Second Vatican Council as far as participation, as far as engagement in the Mass. The first thing about engaging in the Mass is actually going to Mass, is actually physically getting up on a Sunday to go to Mass. That's the first number one tick the box about participation in the Mass, is going to Mass. And you cannot fault a traditional movement for engaging with laity to go to Mass. Simply can't, And traditional Catholics, as I saw in Mexico, fully participate in the Mass, knew all the responses, You know, the day I was there, I was in the Society of St. Pius X chapel in near Polanco. You know, they were selling missiles. They'd got a batch of missiles in. You know, people were buying them. You know, people were actively participating in the Mass. They knew the prayers of the Mass. They, you know, going to confession, loved the church. You know, so again, I would ask, you know, bishops, priests, cardinals, if you're looking at this video, even the Pope, I don't know if it goes that far. You know, don't shut us down. Don't shut us. Walk with us. Walk with us. You know, we're part of this synodal journey as well. But I can, for if you're not focused on engaging people's minds and hearts with Christ in the Eucharist, very little else is going to reform the church. It's the number one mission. Because once you've engaged with Christ, you know, you can engage, you just see the church so differently. It simply works that way. I don't know. It's hard to explain. You know, and it's a labor of love. It should be traditional Catholics that love the traditional Mass, that understand what I'm saying. Please understand what I'm saying. If we're traditional Catholics, it has to be love for the church. This has to be a message of love, something that'll profoundly change the church. That's the mission, guys. And you know, the traditional movement, I've said in other episodes, it's not just about, it's a bigger movement. It's a worldwide, you know, and I would just ask people to consider that. But no, so that's what it, you know, just recapping what I've done in other videos, you know, what I feel called that we should do, you know, what I think Christ is asking us to do is to renew the Eucharist. And Christ has placed me on this path of experiencing different things, seeing the Mass from different angles, talking to different people. And it's just that experience of the Eucharist is transformative. You know, you have to take time. You know, Cardinal Sarah, he wrote a book on silence. You know, silence in the Mass, silence when you receive communion. That moment of adoration, that moment of kneeling, it's just that preparation. It's hard to express it all. But if you've experienced the same, you'll probably understand, and that's what I'm really asking people. Okay, I won't be on this channel for a few days. I'm going to Lochderg. For if anyone wants to come, you can find me there tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, and barefoot, fasting and praying for the church. I don't hugely enjoy it, but I get a lot of it helps me afterwards. It helps me. The 2 times I've gone before, it's helped me a lot, and I just think, you know, it's a time now to really pray as much as I can. And I do like the silence. I won't be recording there because other people go there, and it's not fair to, and you're not supposed to bring videos and stuff, but I'll take some photos of the dawn, of the sun breaking. That's really beautiful, but that's about it. So if you want to know what Lochderg is, there's lots of videos out there. But anyway, just praying for you all, and you know, renew the Eucharist. Go to a traditional Latin Mass out of wonderment, not of protest. You know, we're not against the church. We love the church. We want the beating heart of the Eucharist to transform hearts and minds, and it's beautiful. I mean, Christ is amazing if you know him. If you encounter him, he is truly amazing. He simply does transform your interior life. I mean, so many issues that I had, so many problems, so many, you know, it was your mind would be, you know, you could be focused on stuff that, you know, is tearing your life apart, and the Eucharist Christ transforms you. It really does. Confession, the Eucharist, adoration, you know, slowly entering in and encountering Christ, it transforms you. And it's the small details. It's the small details in the old Mass that you know, you missed it. That was beautiful. It's right and proper for Catholics to want to retain that in the church and to bring it forward, to teach our kids, look for what is true, good and beautiful, in Catholicism, and I could talk more about this. How can we do this better? But I would ask traditional Catholics in this moment in time in the church to please, pray for the Pope, walk with the church, and if you love the traditional Latin Mass, go to traditional Latin Mass. Show others how beautiful it is. Out of a sign, out of wonderment, out of beauty, bring people to what is true, good and beautiful. And if people are saying, "Oh, Robert, are you saying that the traditional Latin Mass is truer or gooder or more beautiful than the Novus Ordo?" Yes, I am. I am saying that. After a lot of meditation, after a lot of thinking for many years, and I've served Mass with Pope John Paul II. I stood beside him on Easter Vigil, and it's and who am I anyway in the church? But I'm just saying, it's the small things. It's especially we've lost something. And unless you go and you meditate and you take the time to meditate on the traditional Latin Mass and meditate on the Mass, you may not see it. I didn't see it. It took me a while to understand. Oh God, we really have lost something here. And we would be losing something incredibly precious if we allowed the traditional Latin Mass to be lost in the church. We would be losing something incredibly valuable, precious, profound, mystical. What can I say? It's just beautiful. It's not about dividing the church. It's about leading people back to Christ. We need to reorient the church. We need to return ad orientem, like the Syrio-Malabar Church did. The Pope has ordered that whole church to return ad orientem in their worship. We need to return ad orientem. We need to discover the mystery of the Mass, the Eucharist. It's just a topic that I love so much. But and that's my plea. That's my plea. It won't be me. It'll be somebody else. But let's try it. Let's bring people back. If we're not talking about the Eucharist in the synodal process as our number one preoccupation, how can we bring souls back to the Eucharist? If we're not making it the number one key issue, we are just talking nonsense. If you're not engaging people with Christ, they won't understand his teaching. Nobody will understand what Christ is asking of the church if they don't meet him. You have to meet Christ in the Eucharist. I beg people. Anyway, God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.